The morning sun had barely risen when Eduardo Reyes turned his old Honda into the parking lot of Westfield Academy. The school's brick buildings stood tall against the pale blue sky, their windows not yet lit with classroom activity. Eduardo parked in the far corner, away from where teachers and students would later claim the best spots. He sat for a moment, hands still on the wheel, and took a deep breath. 5:30 in the morning. 2 hours before the first teachers would arrive. 3 before students would flood the halls. This quiet time belonged to him and the other maintenance staff, the invisible people who kept Westfield running. Eduardo grabbed his worn lunchbox from the passenger seat and stepped out into the cool morning air. His uniform, gray pants and a blue shirt with maintenance stitched above the pocket, had been washed and pressed the night before. He always made sure to look clean and professional, even if most people never really looked at him. "Morning, Eddie," called Hector, the head of maintenance, unlocking the side entrance. "Coffee's already on." "Thanks, boss," Eduardo replied with a small smile, his accent still thick despite 15 years in America. Inside, Eduardo checked his daily assignment sheet. Hallway floors in the East Wing. Clean science lab sinks. Replace light bulbs in the music room. Stock paper towels in all bathrooms. The list went on. He gathered his supplies and set to work, moving methodically through the quiet building. As he mopped the gleaming hallway floors, Eduardo's mind wandered to his daughter, Sophia. She was probably still sleeping, her alarm set for 6:45. He pictured her room, small but neat, walls covered with honor roll certificates and a single photograph of her mother. 8 years gone now, taken by cancer when Sophia was just 7. The thought made his chest tighten, but he pushed it away. Focus on the work. Focus on why you're here. The truth was, Eduardo could have found janitorial work closer to their apartment, maybe even with better pay, but none of those jobs would have come with the employee tuition discount that helped Sophia attend Westfield Academy. Even with the discount, the tuition took nearly every spare penny he had. 2 jobs, here in the mornings and evenings with afternoon shifts at a grocery store deli counter, just to make ends meet. Worth it, he thought. Every hour of work was worth it to see Sophia walk these halls as a student, not just the janitor's daughter. By 7:30, the first teachers began arriving. Eduardo nodded politely as they passed, receiving distracted good mornings from some and nothing from others. He didn't take it personally. Teachers had busy minds full of lesson plans and student concerns. Besides, he preferred being unnoticed. It made things easier for Sophia. "Excuse me," came a sharp voice as Eduardo was wiping down the trophy case. A woman in an expensive-looking suit stood nearby, coffee cup in hand. Mrs. Harrington, the school board president. Eduardo recognized her from the framed photos in the administrative office. "There's a spill in the main office, coffee. Someone should clean that up immediately." "Yes, ma'am," Eduardo replied, already reaching for his cart. "I'll take care of it." Mrs. Harrington didn't acknowledge his response, already walking away, phone pressed to her ear. Eduardo wheeled his cleaning supplies toward the office, his face betraying nothing. In his former life back in Colombia, people had looked at him differently, but that was before the threats that forced them to flee. Before becoming just another immigrant starting over, the office staff barely glanced up as he cleaned the coffee spill. Eduardo worked quickly and thoroughly, making sure not a trace remained on the expensive carpet. As he finished, the first bell rang, signaling students to head to their homerooms. He needed to be out of the main halls now. This was when Sophia might be passing through. Their agreement was simple. At school, they were strangers. Sophia had begged him to take the job at a different school, but the tuition discount was too valuable to pass up, so they compromised. Eduardo would work early mornings and evenings when possible. During school hours, he'd stay in less traveled areas. And if they did see each other, there would be no recognition, no hint they were father and daughter. "It's not that I'm ashamed, Papa," Sophia had explained, her eyes pleading for understanding. "But you know how kids are. They'll never let me forget it if they know my dad cleans their bathrooms." Eduardo understood all too well. Teenagers could be cruel, especially the wealthy ones who made up most of Westfield's student body. Sophia was already an outsider, one of the few scholarship students living in a small apartment instead of a mansion, wearing carefully budgeted clothes instead of designer labels. He wouldn't make her life harder. By lunchtime, Eduardo was deep in the school's basement, checking the boiler system and changing air filters. The work was solitary and peaceful. Sometimes, if he was alone, he would hum softly. Old songs from his youth, classical pieces he once knew by heart. Music had been his first love, before family, before responsibility. Now it was just a ghost that haunted quiet moments. His phone vibrated in his pocket. A text from Sophia. Aced my history test. Mrs. Liu said my essay on Colombian independence was the best in class. Eduardo smiled, pride warming his chest. He typed back, "That's my girl. Smart like your mother." He added a heart emoji, then deleted it, then added it again. Sophia was 15 now, sometimes too cool for her dad's affection. But sometimes she still needed it. At 3 o'clock, students poured out of the building, rushing to waiting cars or sports practices. Eduardo watched from a window in the administrative wing, spotting Sophia in the crowd. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, backpack slung over one shoulder. She walked alone, head high despite being ignored by the laughing groups around her. Strong girl, brave girl. Eduardo returned to his duties, knowing Sophia would take the bus home, start her homework, and heat up the dinner he'd prepared the night before. He wouldn't be home until after 9 when his evening shift ended. As the school quieted, Eduardo moved to the east wing to start his afternoon tasks. Passing the music room, he paused. The door was open, the room empty. Inside sat a beautiful grand piano, a recent donation from a wealthy alumni family. Eduardo glanced down the empty hallway, then stepped inside. His hands itched as he looked at the gleaming instrument. How long had it been since he'd touched a real piano? 5 years, 6? He approached cautiously, almost reverently, and lifted the cover from the keys. Perfect white and black, waiting silently. Eduardo closed his eyes, remembering. There had been a time when his hands knew exactly what to do, when music flowed from his fingers like water. "Can I help you with something?" Eduardo jumped back, heart racing. In the doorway stood Mr. Wilson, the music teacher, eyebrows raised in question. "Sorry, sir," Eduardo stammered, quickly lowering the piano cover. "Just cleaning. Dust." He grabbed the cloth from his cart and began wiping the piano's polished surface, avoiding eye contact. Mr. Wilson watched for a moment, then shrugged. "Well, make sure everything's back in place when you're done. The chamber orchestra has practice here tomorrow morning." "Yes, sir. Of course." When the teacher left, Eduardo let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Stupid, he thought. So stupid to risk being caught. If someone reported him touching the instruments, it could mean his job. And without this job, Sophia's future at Westfield would crumble. That evening, as Eduardo emptied trash cans in the administrative offices, he overheard Principal Gardner speaking with the events coordinator. "The Spring Arts Gala is our biggest fundraiser of the year," the principal was saying. "Everything must be perfect. The board members will all be there, not to mention our biggest donors." "Everything's on track," the coordinator assured him. "The student art is exceptional this year, and the music program has prepared an impressive lineup." Eduardo moved quietly, trying not to disturb their conversation. The Spring Arts Gala. Sophia had mentioned it. She was hoping to volunteer, to finally find a way to connect with her classmates. "By the way," the principal added, lowering his voice slightly, "we need to discuss the scholarship program expansions. The board is split on whether to increase funding next year." Eduardo slowed his movement, straining to hear more. Sophia's continued enrollment depended on her scholarship. "I'll add it to the agenda for next week," the coordinator replied. "Though between us, I think we need to be more selective. Some of these scholarship kids just don't fit the Westfield profile." Eduardo's jaw tightened, but his face remained impassive. He'd heard comments like this before. The suggestion that students like Sophia, students who didn't come from wealth and privilege, somehow didn't belong here, despite their academic achievements. Later that night, Eduardo finally arrived home, body aching from the long day. Their apartment was small but clean, decorated with colorful throws and photos that reminded them of home. Sophia sat at the kitchen table, textbooks spread around her, hair now loose around her shoulders. "Papa," she greeted him, looking up from her calculus homework. "You look tired." "Just the usual," he replied, setting down his keys. "How was school?" Sophia's face lit up. "I got picked to help with the Spring Arts Gala. I'll be helping set up the student art displays." Her excitement faded slightly. "The only problem is parents are supposed to attend. But I told Mrs. Abernathy my dad works nights and can't make it." Eduardo nodded, ignoring the pang in his chest. Another school event he would miss. Another normal parent experience denied to both of them. That's wonderful about the gala, mija. I'm proud of you. Sophia studied his face. Are you sure you're okay with me doing this? Some of the planning meetings might run late. Of course I'm okay with it. This is why we're here, so you can have these opportunities. He smiled, trying to hide his exhaustion. Now, did you eat dinner? As Sophia talked about her day, Eduardo listened attentively, asking questions about her classes and teachers. These evening conversations were precious, the reward for his long days. In these moments, he wasn't the invisible janitor. He was just a father, hearing about his daughter's triumphs and challenges, offering what wisdom he could. What he didn't tell her was how he'd overheard two students that afternoon, laughing about that weird scholarship girl who never talks. He didn't mention the overheard conversation about making the scholarship program more selective. Some burdens were his alone to bear. Later, after Sophia had gone to bed, Eduardo sat at their small kitchen table, reviewing bills and counting the money that remained for the month. Not enough, as usual. He would need to pick up weekend shifts at the grocery store again. He rubbed his tired eyes, feeling the weight of it all. The long hours, the invisibility, the constant worry about money. But then his gaze fell on Sophia's latest test, proudly displayed on the refrigerator. A perfect score with a teacher's note. Exceptional analysis, you have a bright future ahead. Eduardo smiled. This was why. This was always why. Tomorrow he would again become the invisible man, moving through hallways where people looked past him. But here, in this small apartment, he was everything to someone who mattered more than the whole world. Sophia Reyes stood in front of her small closet, trying to decide what to wear for the first Spring Arts Gala planning meeting after school. Nothing seemed right. Not the jeans she'd worn twice this week already. Not the sweater with the small hole near the collar that she usually hid with a scarf. Certainly not the one nice dress she saved for special occasions. She sighed, glancing at the clock. The bus would come in 20 minutes. Her father had already left for his early shift at Westfield, leaving behind a lunch packed with care and a note wishing her a good day. Sophia smiled at his familiar handwriting, before turning back to the closet problem. The planning committee would be full of girls like Brooke, Chen and Lily Patterson, girls with designer clothes and perfect highlights who went skiing in Aspen over winter break, girls who never had to check price tags or calculate whether they could afford both a new notebook and lunch that day. Finally, Sophia settled on her least-worn jeans and a plain blue top she'd bought on clearance. Simple but clean. Unremarkable, which was sometimes the best she could hope for. She brushed her long dark hair and applied a bit of tinted lip balm, her only makeup. On the bus ride to school, Sophia reviewed her notes for the calculus test. Around her, other students from her neighborhood chatted and laughed. Most of them attended the public high school nearby. Sophia was the only one in a Westfield uniform, and she felt their occasional glances. Not unfriendly, just curious. What was it like at that fancy school? Was she stuck up now? Did she think she was better than them? She didn't. If anything, Sophia felt caught between worlds, not quite belonging in either one. At school, Sophia kept to herself as usual. She answered questions in class when called upon, her responses thoughtful and well-prepared. Teachers appreciated her. That quiet, serious scholarship student who always did the reading, always turned assignments in on time. But appreciation wasn't the same as connection. During lunch, Sophia sat alone at the end of a table, reading a book while she ate the sandwich her father had made. Nearby, Brooke Chen and her friends discussed weekend plans. My parents rented out the entire rooftop at the summit for my birthday, Brooke was saying. There's going to be a live band and everything. You're all coming, right? The other girls nodded enthusiastically. Who all is invited? Asked Lily, twirling her blonde hair around one finger. Just our crowd, Brooke replied. I wanted to keep it exclusive. Sophia turned a page in her book, pretending not to hear. She wouldn't be invited, of course. She never was. After nearly a full year at Westfield, she remained firmly on the outside of every social circle. But today might be different. Today was the first Arts Gala planning meeting, and Sophia had volunteered specifically because it seemed like a chance to finally connect with her classmates. To contribute something valuable, to be seen as more than just that scholarship girl. After her last class, Sophia made her way to the art room where the meeting would be held. Her stomach fluttered with nervous hope. Ms. Rivera, the art teacher, smiled as Sophia entered. "Welcome, Sophia. Glad you could join us. We need all the help we can get." Sophia nodded shyly and took a seat near the back of the room. Gradually, other students filtered in, including Brooke and several of her friends. They claimed seats at the front, already discussing ideas in confident voices. Ms. Rivera called the meeting to order. "All right, everyone. The Spring Arts Gala is Westfield's biggest cultural event of the year. We showcase student talent in visual arts, music, and performance while raising funds for the arts program. We have just 6 weeks to pull everything together." The teacher began assigning tasks. "Brooke, you did such a wonderful job with decorations last year. Would you head that committee again?" Brooke nodded, pleased. "Absolutely. I already have some amazing ideas," Ms. Rivera continued. "We need volunteers for the art display setup, program design, refreshments, and publicity." Sophia raised her hand tentatively. "I could help with the art displays." Ms. Rivera beamed. "Perfect. Sophia has an excellent eye for detail. Megan and Tyler, would you work with Sophia on that?" A red-haired girl and tall boy nodded, though neither looked directly at Sophia. The meeting continued with the popular students claiming the most visible roles. By the end, Sophia had been assigned to help mount and arrange the student artwork for display, a behind-the-scenes job that suited her just fine. As they were gathering their things to leave, Ms. Rivera approached Sophia. "I'm so glad you volunteered. We could use your thoughtfulness on this project." Sophia smiled, genuinely touched. "Thanks for giving me a chance." "Actually," Ms. Rivera lowered her voice, "I had another thought. We display faculty artwork too, and I was wondering if you might want to submit something. I've seen your sketches during free periods. You have real talent." Sophia's eyes widened.
"Me? But I'm not even in an art class. That doesn't matter."
The gala is about celebrating all forms of creativity in our community. Community. The word hung in the air, sweet and tantalizing. Was it possible she could truly be part of this place? "I'll think about it," Sophia promised. After the meeting, Sophia needed to use the restroom before heading to the bus stop. The hallways were mostly empty now, with just a few students lingering at their lockers or heading to sports practice. As she rounded the corner near the music wing, she heard voices, laughing, mocking voices that made her slow her steps. "Dude, did you see that janitor trying to get the gum off the bottom of the desk in Henderson's room? He was practically crawling on the floor." Sophia froze. They were talking about her father. "Oh my God, that old guy with the accent? The one who's always mumbling to himself." "Yeah, him. My dad says those jobs should go to people who can actually speak English properly. Like, how hard is it to learn the language if you're going to live here?" Sophia pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding. Around the corner, she could see 4 boys, all juniors or seniors, all from wealthy families. The kind of boys who never looked twice at her in the hallways. "My mom says the school hires them because they work cheap," another boy added. "Bet you anything he's illegal. Half of them are. Did you see his shoes? They're like falling apart. Bet he found them in the trash." More laughter. Sophia's face burned with anger and shame. Her father's shoes were old because he spent money on her things instead of his own, because every extra dollar went toward her future, not his comfort. She wanted to step around the corner to confront them, to defend the man who sacrificed everything for her. But fear kept her frozen in place. These boys could make her remaining time at Westfield miserable. They could destroy what little chance she had of being accepted here. "Hey, Pedro," one of the boys suddenly called out, and Sophia realized with horror that her father had appeared at the other end of the hallway, pushing his cleaning cart. "¿Cómo estás, amigo?" The boy's terrible accent and exaggerated gestures made the others snicker. Eduardo simply nodded politely. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. Excuse me, please." He tried to maneuver his cart past them. One boy stepped slightly into his path. "Hey, I dropped some trash over there. That's your job, right? Picking up after us?" Eduardo's face remained neutral, dignified. "I'll clean this hallway in about 30 minutes as scheduled. If you need something disposed of immediately, there's a trash can by the water fountain." The boy seemed surprised by the calm, articulate response. He'd clearly expected broken English or confusion. After a moment, he shrugged and moved aside. "Whatever, man. Come on, guys, we're going to be late for practice." The boys sauntered off, already moving on to some other topic. Eduardo continued down the hallway, his back straight, his pace unhurried. Only Sophia, who knew him better than anyone, could see the slight tightness around his mouth, the barely perceptible stiffness in his shoulders. Tears stung her eyes. She waited until both her father and the boys were out of sight before hurrying to the bathroom. Inside a stall, she let a few silent tears fall, wiping them quickly away. This wasn't the first time she'd overheard cruel comments about immigrants, about people who worked with their hands, about people like her father. It probably wouldn't be the last. By the time Sophia boarded the bus home, she had composed herself. One conversation with her art teacher, one small invitation to belong, now seemed insignificant compared to what her father endured every day. Maybe she was foolish to think the arts gala could change anything. At home, Sophia heated up the stew her father had prepared the night before and settled at the kitchen table with her homework. Hours passed as she worked through calculus problems and outlined an essay for English class. Her father wouldn't be home until after 9. These solitary evenings had become routine. When Eduardo finally came through the door, Sophia could see the weariness in every line of his body. But he smiled when he saw her, that same warm smile that had been her comfort since childhood. "Still studying?" he asked, setting down his lunchbox. "It's getting late. Just finishing up," Sophia replied. She hesitated, then said, "The arts gala planning has started." "I'm helping with the art displays. That's wonderful, mija." "Your mother would be proud. She always said you had an artist's eyes." Sophia nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Should she tell him about what she'd overheard? About the boys and their cruel words? No. It would only hurt him to know she had witnessed that moment of disrespect. "Ms. Rivera asked if I want to submit some artwork for display," she said instead. Eduardo's face brightened. "You should. Your drawings are beautiful. I don't know. Everyone else has had proper training, and you have natural talent." Eduardo went to the refrigerator, pulling out leftovers to eat. "Don't underestimate yourself, Sophia. You belong there as much as anyone." Did she, though? The question lingered as she got ready for bed. The worlds of Westfield Academy and their small apartment seemed so far apart, separate universes that were never meant to intersect. Yet here they were, father and daughter, trying to bridge that impossible gap. That night, Sophia lay awake long after she should have been asleep, thinking about bridges and belonging and the cost of dreams. Outside her window, the city hummed with distant traffic. Somewhere in the building, a neighbor's television played faintly, normal sounds of a normal night. But tomorrow would bring another day of careful navigation between worlds. Another day of pretending not to see her father in the hallways. Another day of quiet persistence in a place where everything from her accent to her second-hand clothes marked her as different. Sophia turned over in bed, pulling the covers closer around her shoulders. In the darkness, she made a decision. She would submit artwork for the gala. She would continue with the planning committee. She would find her place at Westfield somehow. And maybe, just maybe, she would find a way to build a bridge strong enough for both her and her father to cross. The Spring Arts Gala was only 3 days away, and Westfield Academy buzzed with excitement. Banners hung in the main hallway, student artwork filled display cases, and the music department held extra rehearsals during lunch breaks. For the past month, Sophia had spent afternoons helping prepare the art exhibits, carefully mounting paintings and arranging sculptures for maximum impact. Today, she stood back to assess the photography display she'd just completed. Black and white portraits of local homeless people, taken by a senior photography student, lined the wall in a powerful grid pattern. "That looks amazing," said Megan, the red-haired girl who'd been assigned to work with Sophia. Over the weeks, they'd developed a cautious friendship built on shared tasks and quiet conversations. "You have a really good eye for this stuff," Sophia smiled. "Thanks. I think it tells a story this way. Seeing all their faces together makes you realize they're not so different from us." "My mom would hate it," Megan said with a small laugh. "Too depressing for a fundraiser. She thinks art should be pretty flowers and landscapes. My dad says art should make you feel something. Even if that feeling isn't always comfortable," Sophia replied, then immediately worried she'd said too much. She rarely mentioned her father at school, but Megan just nodded. "Your dad sounds cool. Is he coming to the gala?" Sophia busied herself adjusting a frame that didn't need adjusting. "He works nights," she said, the practiced excuse coming easily. "He can't make it, that sucks. My parents are coming even though I begged them not to. My mom will probably tell everyone embarrassing stories about me as a baby. Sophia forced a laugh, ignoring the ache in her chest. What she wouldn't give for that kind of ordinary embarrassment. A mother who told silly stories. A father who could attend school events without fear of judgment. Ms. Rivera approached, clipboard in hand. The display looks wonderful, girls. Sophia, did you bring your piece? We have the perfect spot for it. After much encouragement from her father, Sophia had submitted a charcoal drawing for the gala. It showed hands, old weathered hands, carefully repairing a child's broken toy. The hands were her father's, though no one at school would know that. It's in my locker, Sophia replied. I'll get it now. As she walked through the hallways, Sophia felt a rare sense of pride. For once, she wasn't just the quiet scholarship student. She was a contributor, someone with something valuable to offer. Even Brooke had complimented her work on the displays, though the popular girl still hadn't invited her to sit at lunch or join weekend outings. Small steps, her father would say. Small steps still move you forward. Back in the art room, Sophia found Ms. Rivera arranging a display of faculty artwork. The teacher smiled when she saw Sophia's drawing. This is absolutely beautiful, she said, studying the detailed hands. There's so much emotion in it. You've captured something really special here. Sophia blushed. Thank you. You know, the community college offers weekend art classes. They have scholarships available. I'd be happy to write you a recommendation. Hope fluttered in Sophia's chest. Real art training? It seemed impossible, yet here was Ms. Rivera offering a path forward. I'd like that, Sophia said softly. Thank you. Later that afternoon, as most students headed home, Sophia stayed to help with final preparations. The maintenance staff had begun setting up chairs in the auditorium for the musical performances that would accompany the art exhibition. From the corner of her eye, Sophia spotted her father moving carefully between rows, straightening chairs with methodical precision. She wanted to go to him, to share her excitement about Ms. Rivera's offer, about having her drawing displayed, about all the small victories of the past few weeks. But they had their rules. At school, they were strangers. Instead, Sophia headed to the music room to help the student orchestra arrange their sheet music for tomorrow's rehearsal. As she passed the grand piano in the corner, she paused. The magnificent instrument gleamed under the room lights, its polished surface reflecting the afternoon sun from the windows. Her father had taught her a little piano when she was younger, before they'd had to sell their small upright to pay medical bills. His hands had guided hers over the keys, patient and gentle as she struggled through simple melodies. Music lives in your heart, not just your fingers, he'd told her. Remember that, Sophia? Admiring our Steinway? Sophia jumped. Mr. Wilson, the music teacher, had entered the room carrying a stack of sheet music. Sorry, she said quickly. It's beautiful. Indeed it is. A generous donation from the Patterson family last year. He set down the music and came to stand beside her. Do you play? Sophia shook her head. Not really. Just a little, a long time ago. Well, feel free to come by sometime if you want to try it out. Music should be for everyone, not just those taking lessons. Sophia thanked him, knowing she would never take him up on the offer. Some dreams were too risky to pursue. The next morning brought disaster. Sophia was helping hang the final decorations in the main hall when Ms. Rivera rushed in, face flushed with panic. Anton Park just called, she announced to the committee members. He has the flu and can't perform tomorrow night. Brooke groaned. But he's our pianist. The whole second half of the program depends on him. Anton Park was a renowned local pianist who had agreed to perform at the gala as a favor to one of the board members. His participation had been a major selling point for the event. Can we find someone else? Asked Tyler, looking worried. What about Mr. Wilson? Ms. Rivera shook her head. He'll be conducting the student orchestra, and it's too late to find another professional on such short notice. So what do we do? Megan asked. Cancel the piano pieces? We may have to, Ms. Rivera sighed. Unless, she glanced at the student faces around her. Does anyone here play piano at an advanced level? We could modify the program. Silence fell over the group. A few students played basic piano, but nothing close to the complex classical pieces that had been planned. Sophia bit her lip, thinking of her father. He could play. He could play beautifully. But it was impossible. Absolutely impossible. We'll figure something out, Ms. Rivera said finally. Let's focus on finishing the preparations. The day of the gala arrived. By 6 o'clock, the school had transformed into an elegant gallery. Artwork lined the halls, refreshment tables offered fancy hors d'oeuvres, and soft music played through speakers while guests arrived. Sophia, dressed in her one nice outfit, stood near her drawing, nervously watching as parents and community members moved through the exhibits. "Is this yours?" asked a woman in an expensive silk dress, gesturing to Sophia's charcoal drawing. Sophia nodded. "Yes, ma'am. It's quite moving. Those hands, they tell a story, don't they?" "They do," Sophia replied softly. "They're the hands of someone who builds things, fixes things, someone who makes the world better through their work." The woman nodded thoughtfully. "You have real talent, young lady." As the woman moved on, Sophia felt a glow of pride. Maybe this was what belonging felt like, having your voice heard, your vision understood. At 7:30, guests began moving toward the auditorium for the musical portion of the evening. Sophia helped direct people to their seats, avoiding eye contact with her father, who was assisting elderly guests up the short steps to the seating area. Behind the scenes, panic had set in. No replacement pianist had been found. Principal Gardner paced backstage, checking his watch repeatedly. "The Pattersons donated that piano," he muttered to Ms. Rivera. "They'll be extremely disappointed if it sits unused tonight." "I know," she replied, "but we can't conjure a concert pianist out of thin air." Sophia overheard them as she delivered programs to the stage manager. Her heart raced. All evening she'd been wrestling with an impossible idea. A crazy, terrifying, impossible idea. She found Mr. Wilson adjusting his bow tie in a small mirror. "Sir," she began, her voice barely audible. "I might know someone who can play." The music teacher turned to her, eyebrows raised. "Who?" Sophia took a deep breath. "It's complicated. Can you meet me in the hallway in 5 minutes?" Without waiting for an answer, she slipped away, heart pounding. This could ruin everything. Her social standing, her father's job, their careful separation of worlds. But the alternative was failure for the event they'd all worked so hard to prepare. Sophia found her father in a side hallway, refilling paper towel dispensers in the restrooms. "Papa," she whispered urgently, "I need to talk to you." Eduardo looked around quickly to make sure they were alone. "Sophia, what's wrong? Are you okay?" "The pianist canceled. The one who was supposed to play tonight. They don't have a replacement." Her father's expression softened with understanding. I see. That's unfortunate, but you could do it," Sophia blurted out. "You could play." Eduardo's eyes widened. "Sophia, no. You know I can't. My job." "Please, Papa, they need someone. I've heard you play. You're amazing." "That was a long time ago," he said gently. "And what about our agreement? You don't want people here knowing I'm the janitor." Sophia looked down. "I know, but maybe it doesn't matter anymore." Before Eduardo could respond, Mr. Wilson appeared at the end of the hallway. He approached cautiously, glancing between father and daughter with dawning comprehension. "Sophia says you might be able to help us with our pianist problem," he said to Eduardo. Eduardo straightened, professional mask back in place. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. I need to get back to work." "Papa, please," Sophia said, switching to Spanish. "I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of being ashamed." "You have nothing to be ashamed of." "It's not about shame," he replied in the same language. "It's about protecting you." "I don't need protection anymore," she said firmly. "I need my father." Mr. Wilson watched their exchange with interest. "Sir, if you can play, we would be extremely grateful. The entire second half of our program is at risk." Eduardo hesitated, years of caution warring with the pleading in his daughter's eyes. Finally, he sighed. "I played before, in Colombia. But it's been many years." Mr. Wilson's eyes lit up. "What pieces do you know?" "We had Chopin and Liszt on the program." A ghost of a smile crossed Eduardo's face. "Chopin was always my favorite." 10 minutes later, Principal Gardner was informed that a last-minute replacement had been found. No one mentioned that the replacement was the school janitor. Eduardo was hurried to the staff room where he washed his hands and changed into a clean shirt provided by Mr. Wilson. Not quite a tuxedo like the original pianist would have worn, but presentable. "Are you sure about this?" Eduardo asked Sophia as they stood in the wings of the stage. The orchestra had just finished their portion of the program, and Mr. Wilson was explaining to the audience that there had been a change in the piano soloist. Sophia squeezed her father's hand. I've never been more sure of anything. As Mr. Wilson introduced Mr. Eduardo Reyes, an accomplished pianist who has graciously agreed to step in this evening, Sophia watched her father walk onto the stage, back straight, head high. He looked different somehow, not like the invisible man who cleaned floors and emptied trash, but like someone with a story worth telling. In the audience, she could see confusion on some faces. "Wasn't that? Didn't he?" Whispers spread through the crowd as Eduardo took his seat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and placed his hands on the keys. Sophia held her breath. The moment stretched, taut with possibility, and then her father began to play. The auditorium fell silent as Eduardo sat at the grand piano. A few confused whispers still rippled through the audience. Parents leaning toward each other, eyebrows raised in question. Wasn't that the man who cleaned the school? Why was he sitting at the Steinway? In the front row, Mrs. Patterson, who had donated the piano, frowned and whispered something to her husband. Principal Gardner shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly wondering if allowing the janitor to play had been a terrible mistake. From her position in the wings, Sophia could see it all. Her heart hammered in her chest. What if her father couldn't play anymore? What if the years without practice had dulled his skill? What if the audience laughed or, worse, walked out? Eduardo adjusted the bench one more time, his movements unhurried and deliberate. He closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and placed his hands on the keys. Then, magic happened. The opening notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor filled the auditorium, delicate at first like raindrops on still water. Eduardo's fingers moved with surprising grace, coaxing a gentle melody from the instrument. The piece began softly, almost tentatively, matching the uncertainty of the moment. Sophia exhaled slowly. He remembered. After all these years, his hands remembered. The whispers in the audience died away. People who had been checking their phones or scanning the program now looked up, their attention captured by the unexpected beauty coming from the stage. As the piece progressed, Eduardo seemed to transform before their eyes. His shoulders relaxed, his face softened, and a quiet confidence emerged in his posture. This was a man in his element, not a janitor, not an immigrant, but an artist reconnecting with his passion. The music grew more complex. Chopin's composition demanded intricate fingering and emotional nuance, moving from gentle lyricism to thunderous intensity, and back again. Eduardo met every challenge, his work-worn hands dancing across the keys with astonishing precision. In the third row, Sophia spotted the boys who had mocked her father weeks earlier. Their faces registered shock, their snickering replaced by stunned silence. Next to them, Miss Rivera watched with tears gathering in her eyes. One hand pressed against her heart. The music swelled, growing more passionate and complex. Eduardo's whole body now moved with the rhythm, leaning into crescendos, pulling back for quieter passages. This wasn't just technical skill. This was music coming alive through human emotion. Sophia felt a presence beside her and turned to find Megan watching in awe. "That's your dad, isn't it?" Megan whispered. Sophia nodded, unable to speak through the tightness in her throat. "He's incredible," Megan breathed. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" How could Sophia explain? How could she describe the complicated calculus of survival and belonging that had led them here? Instead, she simply said, "It's a long story." On stage, Eduardo reached a particularly difficult passage, a flurry of notes that cascaded like a waterfall. His fingers flew across the keys, never hesitating, never faltering. A few audience members gasped audibly at the display of virtuosity. Mrs. Patterson, who had initially looked so disapproving, now leaned forward in her seat, her expression one of growing respect. Even Principal Gardner appeared captivated, his earlier discomfort replaced by wonder. Mr. Wilson stood in the opposite wing, nodding slightly with each perfectly executed phrase. The music teacher's face shone with a mixture of surprise and delight, as though he'd discovered a precious gem hiding in plain sight. As the piece approached its conclusion, Eduardo's playing grew more intense. Chopin's ballade ends not with gentle resolution but with dramatic force, a statement rather than a question. Eduardo's interpretation captured all the passion and power the composer had intended, his hands commanding the full range of the keyboard. The final chords resonated through the auditorium, powerful and definitive. Then silence. For 3 long seconds no one moved, no one breathed. Then the audience erupted in applause. Not the polite, measured applause of people being socially appropriate, but the spontaneous, thunderous reaction of people genuinely moved. Eduardo remained seated for a moment, eyes closed, hands still resting on the keys. When he finally stood and turned to face the audience, his expression was one of quiet dignity. He bowed slightly, acknowledging their response with humble grace. The applause continued, growing louder. People began to stand. First Mrs. Patterson, then Mr. Wilson, who had come onto the stage, then entire rows at once until the whole auditorium was on its feet, a standing ovation. For her father. Sophia pressed her hands to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Eduardo looked toward the wings, finding his daughter's eyes amid the stage lights. His smile, small but radiant, was for her alone. Mr. Wilson approached the microphone at center stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Eduardo Reyes." He gestured toward Eduardo, who bowed again, more deeply this time. "Would you favor us with one more piece?" The audience applauded their agreement. Eduardo nodded and returned to the piano. This time he didn't hesitate before beginning to play. Sophia recognized the piece immediately, Debussy's Clair de Lune. It had been her mother's favorite, the lullaby of her childhood. The melody was like moonlight itself, gentle, luminous, and somehow both sad and beautiful at once. As the familiar notes washed over her, Sophia felt the weight of years lifting from her shoulders. All the pretending, all the separation, all the careful navigation between worlds. It seemed to fade away with each perfect phrase. People were filming now, phones raised to capture this unexpected moment. In the back of the auditorium, Sophia noticed a local reporter who had come to cover the gala, scribbling furiously in a notebook. Tomorrow people would know. Everyone would know. The careful barrier between their lives would be gone forever. But watching her father play, seeing him fully himself for the first time in years, Sophia couldn't bring herself to regret it. The Debussy piece ended with gentle, fading notes that seemed to linger in the air long after Eduardo's hands lifted from the keys. Again, the audience rose to their feet, applauding even more enthusiastically than before. Mr. Wilson returned to the microphone. "I believe we've all witnessed something extraordinary tonight." "Thank you, Mr. Reyes." He turned to Eduardo. "Would you like to say a few words?" Eduardo hesitated, then nodded. He approached the microphone, adjusting it slightly for his height. "Thank you," he said simply, his accent more noticeable in his nervousness. "It has been many years since I played for an audience. I am grateful for the opportunity." He seemed about to step away, then paused and continued. "In Colombia, before coming to America, I studied at the National Conservatory. Music was my life." He glanced toward Sophia and the wings. "But sometimes life takes unexpected turns. Sometimes we must set aside old dreams to make room for new ones." His voice grew stronger. "I clean your classrooms. I fix your lights. I empty your trash. This work is not glamorous, but it is honest and necessary, and it has allowed my daughter to attend this wonderful school." A murmur went through the crowd as people connected the dots. In the wings, Sophia felt her heart might burst with pride and love. "My daughter," Eduardo continued, "is the true artist in our family now. Her drawing hangs in the west hallway, hands repairing a broken toy. Those are my hands. But the vision, the talent, that is all hers." He smiled then, a full, genuine smile that transformed his face. "Thank you for listening, both to my music and my words. Good evening." The applause that followed was different, warmer somehow, more personal. As Eduardo left the stage, Mr. Wilson announced a brief intermission before the final portion of the program. In the wings, Sophia rushed to her father, throwing her arms around him. "Papa, that was amazing." Eduardo hugged her tightly. "Are you okay, mija?" "I know this wasn't the plan. I'm more than okay," she said, pulling back to look at him. "I've never been prouder to be your daughter." People were approaching now, Mr. Wilson, Ms. Rivera, even Principal Gardner. All wanted to speak with Eduardo, to ask about his training, to express their amazement. "Mr. Reyes," the principal began, looking somewhat flustered. "That was quite extraordinary." "I had no idea. Few people did," Eduardo replied calmly. "It wasn't relevant to my job here." Principal Gardner had the grace to look embarrassed. "Well, perhaps we should talk about your position at Westfield. Clearly, your talents could be better utilized." Before Eduardo could respond, Mrs. Patterson approached, her husband following behind. The woman who had donated the Steinway regarded Eduardo with newfound respect. "Mr. Reyes, your playing was magnificent. Where did you study?" "Bogotá, Colombia." "Under Maestro Alejandro Vargas." Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose. "Vargas, he's legendary." "You were his student?" "For 8 years," Eduardo nodded. "Until the political situation made it impossible to stay." "This is William Patterson." She gestured to her husband. "He's on the board of the Community Arts Foundation. I think we need to talk." Sophia watched in amazement as her father was surrounded by people who had previously looked through him, as though he were invisible. Now they listened intently to his every word, nodding and asking questions with genuine interest. Megan appeared at Sophia's side. "Your dad is basically famous now. Everyone's talking about him." "It's weird," Sophia admitted. "Good weird, but still weird. Why didn't you ever tell anyone he was a pianist?" Sophia sighed. "It's complicated. We came here with nothing, Megan. Music doesn't pay the bills when you're starting over in a new country. And at school, I was afraid of what? Of people knowing my dad was the janitor, of being even more of an outsider than I already was." Megan was quiet for a moment. "That's on us," she finally said. "We made you feel that way." Before Sophia could respond, Brooke approached, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. "Your dad is incredible," she said to Sophia. "Like, professionally good." "He was professionally good," Sophia replied, "back in Colombia. And now he cleans our school." Brooke looked genuinely troubled by this realization. I don't know what that is." "It's life," Sophia said simply. "Sometimes it doesn't go the way you planned." The intermission was ending. Audience members began returning to their seats, many stopping to look at Eduardo with new interest. Sophia noticed the boys who had mocked her father slipping back into the auditorium, their expressions subdued. Mr. Wilson approached Eduardo once more. "The rest of the program can proceed without you if you'd prefer to rest. Or," he hesitated, "we had a student piano and violin duet planned. The piece is simple, but our pianist has a terrible case of stage fright. Would you consider accompanying?" Eduardo glanced at Sophia, a question in his eyes. She nodded encouragingly. "I would be happy to help," he told Mr. Wilson. As the final portion of the program began, Sophia returned to her seat in the audience. Around her, people whispered about the janitor with the extraordinary talent. Some looked embarrassed, perhaps remembering times they had ignored him or treated him dismissively. Others seemed genuinely moved by the unexpected discovery of brilliance in their midst. When Eduardo returned to the stage to accompany a nervous freshman violinist, the audience applauded warmly. He smiled and nodded, then turned his attention to the young musician, offering an encouraging word that made the girl stand a little straighter. As they began to play a simple Mozart piece, Sophia watched her father's face. There was a lightness there she hadn't seen in years, as though something long buried had finally been unearthed and given air to breathe. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever challenges this revelation might bring, Sophia knew one thing with certainty: music had returned to their lives, and with it, a kind of freedom neither of them had allowed themselves to imagine. The morning after the Spring Arts Gala, Eduardo arrived at Westfield Academy at his usual time. 5:30 a.m., the sky still dark, the parking lot empty except for his old Honda, but today felt different. As he walked toward the building, keys in hand, he wondered what awaited him inside. Would last night change anything? Or would the magic of those moments at the piano fade in the harsh light of day, returning him to invisibility? "Morning, Eddie," called Hector, already unlocking the side entrance. "You're a celebrity now, huh?" Eduardo smiled slightly. "Hardly, don't be modest. My wife couldn't stop talking about it all night." "That man can play like an angel," she kept saying. Hector shook his head in wonder. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" Eduardo shrugged. "It never came up." Inside, Eduardo checked his assignment sheet as usual. But before he could gather his cleaning supplies, Principal Gardner appeared in the doorway of the maintenance office. The man looked unusually rumpled, as though he hadn't slept well. "Mr. Reyes, good morning. I was hoping to catch you before you started your rounds." Eduardo straightened. "Good morning, sir. Is something wrong? Wrong?" "No, not at all." The principal seemed uncharacteristically hesitant. I wonder if you might join me in my office for a few minutes. There's something I'd like to discuss with you. Eduardo glanced at Hector, who nodded encouragingly. Go on. I'll cover your first assignments. In the principal's office, Eduardo sat stiffly in the visitor's chair. He'd never been in this room before, though he'd cleaned outside its door hundreds of times. Principal Gardner cleared his throat. Mr. Reyes, I want to be direct. Last night was remarkable. Your performance changed how many people, myself included, see you. He had the grace to look embarrassed. I realize now that we've been underutilizing your talents at Westfield. Eduardo remained silent, waiting. Mr. Wilson tells me you studied at the National Conservatory in Colombia? Under Maestro Vargas? Yes, for 8 years. That's extraordinary. May I ask what brought you to the United States? And to this line of work? Eduardo considered how much to share. These were personal questions. Questions no one at Westfield had bothered to ask in the 2 years he'd worked there. Political unrest made staying dangerous, he said finally. My wife and I came here when Sophia was very young. My wife was a journalist who had written articles critical of powerful people. We left quickly with few resources, he paused. Music requires connections, reputation. Those don't transfer easily across borders. We needed stability, income. I took what work I could find. And your wife? Is she? She died. Cancer 8 years ago. The principal nodded soberly. I'm very sorry to hear that. He seemed to be seeing Eduardo, truly seeing him, for the first time. Mr. Reyes, I've received several calls this morning. About you, Eduardo tensed. Had someone complained? Was his job in jeopardy? Mrs. Patterson called first, the principal continued. She and her husband were deeply impressed by your playing. They've expressed interest in supporting you in some way, perhaps through a position at the Community Arts Foundation. Eduardo's eyebrows rose in surprise. Then Mr. Wilson called. He'd like you to consider teaching piano to advanced students here at Westfield. We've been contracting with outside instructors, but having someone in-house would be preferable. Principal Gardner leaned forward. And finally, I received a call from a reporter at the local paper. Your performance last night has become something of a story. People are interested, Mr. Reyes. Eduardo absorbed this information slowly. After years of invisibility, suddenly everyone wanted to see him. What about my current position? He asked practically. That's what I wanted to discuss. We could adjust your schedule, reduce your maintenance hours, and add teaching responsibilities. The pay would be better, of course. The principal smiled tentatively. Perhaps you could even perform at next year's gala as a featured artist rather than a last-minute replacement. Eduardo felt a mixture of emotions: hope, suspicion, tentative joy. I would need to discuss this with Sophia. Any change would affect her too. Of course. And speaking of your daughter, Principal Gardner hesitated. Sophia is an impressive young woman, very mature for her age. Her teachers speak highly of her academic abilities, and now I understand she's quite talented artistically as well. The school could explore additional scholarship options for her. Eduardo nodded, careful to keep his expression neutral despite the relief flooding through him. Sophia's continued education at Westfield had been a constant worry. Thank you. I will consider everything you've said. As Eduardo left the office, he felt slightly dazed. After years of struggling to remain employed, to keep Sophia in school, to simply survive, suddenly doors were opening. It seemed impossible, yet here it was. He completed his morning duties in a state of quiet contemplation. As the hallways began to fill with students, Eduardo noticed something different. People were looking at him. Not through him, not past him, but at him, with curiosity, interest, even respect. Several teachers nodded or smiled as they passed. A few students whispered to each other, pointing discreetly. One boy, one of those who had mocked him weeks earlier, approached hesitantly. Mr. Reyes, I just wanted to say, you were amazing last night. Like seriously amazing. Eduardo nodded his acknowledgement. Thank you. The boy shifted uncomfortably. I also wanted to, apologize. For before, when me and my friends were, we were jerks. Eduardo studied the young man's face, seeing genuine remorse. We all make mistakes, he said quietly. What matters is learning from them. The boy nodded, relief visible in his expression. Yeah, thanks. By lunchtime, word had spread throughout the school. Eduardo the janitor was actually Eduardo the concert pianist. As he cleaned the cafeteria, He could feel eyes following him, could hear his name in conversations around the room, and then he saw Sophia. She sat at a table with Megan and, surprisingly, Brooke and several other popular students. They seemed to be listening intently as Sophia spoke, her hands moving expressively. When she noticed her father, she smiled, openly without hiding their connection, and gave a small wave. Eduardo waved back, his heart full. Whatever challenges lay ahead, that simple acknowledgement made everything worthwhile. After school, Sophia found him in the music wing, where he was changing light bulbs in the practice rooms. "Papa," she said, closing the door behind her, "everyone's talking about you. Did you know you're trending on social media? Someone posted a video of your performance." Eduardo shook his head, bemused. "I know nothing about trending." "Well, you are. And the local newspaper called Mom's old colleague, Ms. Rosario, asking for information about you. She called me during lunch to let me know. Principal Gardner mentioned a reporter." Eduardo sighed. "I'm not sure I want this attention, Sophia." "It's good attention, Papa. People should know how talented you are." She hesitated. "Principal Gardner told me about the teaching position. Are you going to take it?" "I don't know yet. It's a big change." Sophia leaned against the wall, watching him work. "You should do it. I saw your face when you were playing. You looked alive. More alive than I've seen you in years." Eduardo paused, screwdriver in hand. "You've had enough change in your life, Mia. And what about your friends? Now that everyone knows your father is the janitor." "Was the janitor," Sophia corrected. "And you know what? Nobody cares. Or if they do, they're not the people I want as friends anyway." She smiled wryly. "Besides, having a dad who's a brilliant pianist is actually pretty cool." Eduardo laughed softly. "Is that so?" "Definitely. Brooke asked if you would teach her. She's apparently been taking lessons for years but still can't play anything harder than for Elise." They shared a smile. This newfound openness between them both strange and wonderful. "Megan's mom invited us for dinner Saturday," Sophia added. "Her dad's a carpenter. She thinks you two would get along." Eduardo raised an eyebrow. "Us, both of us?" "Both of us," Sophia confirmed. "As ourselves. No more hiding, Papa." Later that evening, Eduardo received another surprise visitor. Mrs. Patterson appeared at the maintenance office just as he was preparing to leave for the day. "Mr. Reyes," she said warmly. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, Mrs. Patterson. What can I do for you?" The elegant woman seemed slightly uncomfortable in the utilitarian space. "I wanted to speak with you directly. About last night." Eduardo nodded, waiting. "Your playing was extraordinary. Truly. And it made me realize something rather uncomfortable." She met his eyes directly. "I've passed you in these hallways dozens of times without really seeing you. Without wondering about your story or your talents or your struggles. That's not the kind of person I want to be." Eduardo was surprised by her candor. "We all have our blind spots, Mrs. Patterson. Perhaps. But some blind spots cause more harm than others." She straightened her shoulders. "My husband and I would like to establish a scholarship fund for talented musicians facing financial hardship. We'd like to name it after you if you're willing." Eduardo blinked in surprise. "That's very generous, but it's not charity, Mr. Reyes. It's recognition of both talent and perseverance. Your story, well, it's made many of us reconsider our assumptions." She smiled slightly. "Also selfishly, we'd like you to serve on the selection committee. Your expertise would be invaluable." As Eduardo drove home that evening, his mind swirled with possibilities. Teaching again. Playing again. Being seen for his knowledge and talent rather than just his ability to clean floors and fix lights. The apartment was filled with delicious smells when he arrived. Sophia had cooked dinner, his favorite Colombian dishes, the ones his wife had taught her before she died. "Special occasion?" he asked, hanging up his jacket. "Celebration," Sophia replied, setting the table with their mismatched dishes. "For new beginnings." Over dinner they talked openly about the future for the first time in years. About Eduardo possibly teaching at Westfield. About Sophia's interest in art school after graduation. About the newspaper interview scheduled for tomorrow. "I spoke with Mrs. Patterson," Eduardo told his daughter. "She and her husband want to start a scholarship fund. For musicians." Sophia's eyes widened. "Papa, that's amazing." "There's more. Mr. Wilson asked if I would perform with the student orchestra at the winter concert." Eduardo shook his head in wonder. After all this time to play again? You have to do it, Sophia insisted. Promise me you'll do it. I think I will, he admitted. It feels right. After dinner, they sat together on their small balcony, watching the city lights come on as darkness fell. Sophia had brought out a sketch pad and was drawing her father's profile, capturing the newfound ease in his expression. Are you happy, Papa? She asked suddenly. Eduardo considered the question seriously. I'm hopeful, he said finally. More hopeful than I've been in a very long time. Sophia nodded, understanding the distinction. Mom would be proud of us. Of how we've managed. She would be proud of you, Eduardo corrected gently. So strong, so determined. Just like her. And stubborn, Sophia added with a small smile. Don't forget stubborn. How could I? Eduardo laughed. Especially after last night. If you hadn't been so stubborn about revealing my secret. Someone had to, Sophia said firmly. You deserve to be seen, Papa, really seen. The next morning, Eduardo woke earlier than usual. For the first time in years, he felt drawn to music again. Before Sophia woke, before the sun rose, he sat at their small kitchen table with staff paper borrowed from Mr. Wilson. His pencil moved across the page, noting a melody that had been forming in his mind since last night. A new composition, part celebration, part remembrance, part hope for the future. He titled it simply, Sophia's Courage. When his daughter emerged from her bedroom, rubbing sleep from her eyes, she found him surrounded by pages of music, completely absorbed in creation. Papa? Eduardo looked up, his face alight with inspiration. Good morning, mija. I have something to play for you. Later, when I can use the piano at school? Sophia smiled, recognizing the passion in his voice. I can't wait to hear it. As they prepared for the day, a day that would bring newspaper, interviews and decisions about new jobs and conversations with people who now saw them clearly. Father and daughter moved with a new lightness. The burden of hiding, of separation, of pretending to be less than they were, had lifted. They were at last fully themselves, the pianist and his artist daughter ready to face the world together.